Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? Well, I've just finished the longest video I've ever made for this channel with the 75-minute Sam Keith video about Wolverine Blood Hungry, so naturally from there, we want to move on to a comic that I'm going to have difficulty finding enough to talk about to crack like 15 minutes. We're taking a look at the Coven #1, or Coven #1, depending on if you're a fan of late 90s absurdist documentaries. And I mean, who isn't, right?
It's pronounced Coven, man. What else could it be pronounced?
Coven. That's the proper pronunciation.
No. Coven sounds like oven, man, and that's just, it doesn't work.
So, Coven #1 is the brainchild of Ian Churchill. Ian Churchill's a guy, when the Image guys took off in the early 90s from Marvel, they left a huge gap in their wake that Marvel was struggling to fill. And, I mean, arguably, they've been struggling to fill it for about 30 years. And Ian Churchill was one of the guys who stepped in. He was about 23, 24 at the time when he took over on Cable and had a pretty decent run there. Got about 17 issues in. That ain't bad for a guy making his start. And I'm not sure if it was exactly a celebrated run, but I think it was probably welcomed at least. It's like, hey, we got a guy who can draw. We got a guy who can draw some fun shit. It's like, oh crap, we haven't seen that in a while. Not at Marvel anyway. And he bounced around at Marvel for a little while, got a Deadpool miniseries under his belt, worked on the Heroes Reborn version of the Avengers, helping out Rob Liefeld there, so naturally that's where he met Rob, he met Jeff Loeb, and he let them know that he had an idea for a creator-owned series that he wanted to try to develop. And Rob was in the process of developing Awesome Entertainment. Not literally, that was just the name of his company. But he was able to offer Ian Churchill some time. I mean, like, Ian Churchill, I think even at that time, was very obviously a guy who had a fair bit of talent, and at the very least could produce an Image-style, extreme-looking book. So he brought his ideas over, him and Jeff Loeb fleshed them out, and they turned them into this. This was part of a 4-issue miniseries. And this is a 1997 book, so we're still in the middle of, the whole goth thing, the witchy thing that was starting to take off, or the Wiccan thing. That was what it was turning into, I suppose. Anybody remember The Craft? Yeah, anybody remember going to see The Craft in the theater? Yeah, I do, unfortunately. So that's what this is going to play off, and it's honestly going to read like something a 16-year-old came up with in 1997. It's not. It's something, like a 25-year-old or whatever came up with. But that's not the worst thing. I mean, his market at this time is 16-year-olds, so it kind of works, to be honest. So let's take a look at it. We can start with the cover. This is one of several covers. I think Rob at this time is playing around with the idea of variant covers. It's still kind of a new idea. So there are several variants on this that feature different characters from the series. This is Scratch. He's a priest who was accidentally possessed by a demon. So you get an idea of the kind of flavor we're going to get over the course of this thing. And I mean, this is fine for just a close-up on a character. Like you can see, Ian Churchill knows what he's doing. He seems to have a bit of a Jim Lee influence, or something along those lines anyway. And I managed to get the version with the shiny logo on it, so I appreciate that. I always love a good shiny part of a cover. Okay, so we're not going to get credits for this right off the bat, which is kind of what I'm used to on these by now, actually. So instead, we're going to get a breakdown of our different characters here, which isn't particularly helpful because we're not actually going to see them for quite a few pages, actually. And they're all kind of not super memorable, or at least to start with. So this is all one group, one coven, if you will. We're starting with Phantom here, who's 300 years old. She's a blind half-vampire. So she has some vampire stuff going on, like a lengthened lifespan, not full-on immortality. She can go out in sunlight, though, it's itchy. She can turn into mist. She can cloud men's minds. She looks an awful lot like Alec Baldwin. Now, scratch that last part. Speaking of Scratch. As I said, Scratch is a priest who, he stopped a bunch of kids from messing around with the Necronomicon. Sucks when the kids do that. You keep warning those kids about the dangers of Necronomicon use, but they never seem to listen. So yeah, now he's possessed by some kind of demon guy who likes to wear Versace. Also got Black Mass down here. Big dude. 7th son of a 7th son, whatever the fuck that even means. That's supposed to mean something, like in some kind of context, but who knows what that means here. Super strong and can condense his mass to become stronger. Oh, hey, look, Black Mass is actually kind of a double entendre. I don't mind that. His name is Mark Saxon. I'm less happy about that. We've also got Phenomena, who we'll learn about over the course of the comic, and Spellcaster, who we will not. All right, so we're going to start off With Cain and Abel, only they're, mid-90s extreme Cain and Abel, and the narration helpfully tells us that what you are about to see has never been done before, so this is a trailblazing book. Alright, Cain and Abel are looking at their harvest, and I'm pretty sure we're getting wheat-themed panel borders here. I don't know that that was necessary, but okay, why not, I guess. And I mean, where it's, you don't know this is Cain and Abel at first, but naturally, Cain picks up the rock, smacks Abel across the head, knocks him cross-eyed. That's a bitch. And this is where we find out that it's Cain. And, we're marking Cain for all eternity, etc., etc. That's probably gonna relate to somebody in this book sometime. This version of Cain and Abel is kind of silly. They're essentially super Cain and Abel. The art is not bad at all, I gotta say. I never really checked out much of Ian Churchill's stuff when he was working at Marvel. I think maybe I saw one or two things he was working on. I don't remember it being super impressive, but then again, that would have been right at the beginning of his career, which is when you're allowed to not be super impressive. That's when you're just kind of picking up the basics of being an everyday comic book penciler. At this point, he looks pretty good. This is pretty finished. It's not 100% to my taste, but it's certainly like a fully formed Image style. Like way better than most guys ripping off Jim Lee would manage to do, to be honest. So anyway, here we get our credits. This is going to be written by Jeff Loeb, penciled by Ian Churchill, inked by Norm Ratmond, colored by Awesome Color, edited by Eric Stevenson, as per usual. And this is a fine looking start. Hey, we didn't go splash, double splash. We did setup page double splash, but a double splash on the 2-3 spread, I got no problem with that. I'm always trying to figure out how to work that in more myself. Yeah, fun stuff, fun musculature, fun double lighting. All pretty good. This is kind of creepy looking, because they did the the ghosting overlay on the eye here, so it just kind of looks like there's a glass plate over his, like he's got contacts on, like really thick Pyrex contacts. This is 1997. They're still fucking around with computer color, still trying to kind of figure out what the limits are on that. So I don't blame Ian Churchill on that. I just, I don't even really blame the colorist on that too much. They're going to try shit. You can't blame them for trying shit. And anyway, that is going to be the first 4 pages out of 22 are, hey, Cain and Abel? Yep, here it is. So, okay. All right, so from there we're going to cut to Philadelphia State University, present day. Nothing interesting happened between the Cain and Abel event and present day. So we're introduced to, this was Phenomena. This is Christina, what's her name? Christina Baker. And she's trying to do her sociology term paper, but she keeps reading National Enquirer type shit for some reason. Again, all fine looking. He's putting in a fair amount of detail in the background here. I got 0 problems with that. Yeah, there's no real struggling with coming up with interesting page designs or any of that. Like he's worked out a whole bunch of kinks at this point. This is, he's been in the business for like 4 years. So, he probably should, but should know how to draw comics properly has never been a prerequisite to producing comics, particularly in the mid-90s. So you got to appreciate it when it comes along. She's just kind of wandering around the campus. She gets heavy-duty headaches. And while she's walking by, some building on campus, she decides to go investigate. I get the feeling she's like precognitive. We're going to get like full-on breakdowns in the back, so I'll confirm it at that point. But yeah, she gets like an inkling to go investigate this building. And just kind of investigating along. That's what you do, I guess. Again, everything here is pretty good. It's got a very kind of generic mid-90s feel. It's just a more well-done version of that than we usually see, to be honest. Oh, it's a vertical double-page spread. Shit. We were doing so well. Alright, so this is Phantom? Probably not Phantoma. Phantom. That was it. And Scratch. And they're, like stealing stuff. They're doing some magic crime. This is, I don't like a vertical double page spread. I'm not sure if you guys knew this. This, I don't think, justifies a vertical double page spread. It helps a fair bit, the amount of detail he's putting in the backgrounds here. There's a whole bunch of the whole building that they're in. All sorts of struts and railings. And I guess they're in a library, an annex, something like that. There's a fair amount of consideration about the space they're in. So I appreciate that. I'd prefer to appreciate it on a single page splash, but that would mean having to come up with another page's worth of story. And I don't know if that was entirely possible. I keep hearing that Jeff Loeb writes well. And I've seen a couple of examples of it. All of his stuff with Tim Sale, at the very least, is hey, that's not bad at all. And then he does something with Rob Liefeld, or even just Rob Liefeld adjacent. And it's like he fell in with a bad crowd and started picking up their bad habits. Again, I'm not laying this at the feet of Ian Churchill exactly. I'm more just saying that just by being under the awesome banner, it feels like Jeff Loeb dumbs it down a little bit. All right, so yeah, they're trying to heist up something. Scratch here, he's a little focused on Phantom's ass. And that's going to be a big part of this comic, is Ian Churchill likes drawing women in compromising positions in very little clothing. Fairly often. Or at the very least, he's decided that's what this comic is going to have a lot of. And when your audience is 16-year-old dudes, again, it's not the worst plan. It does mean we get a whole lot of pages with not much of anything going on whatsoever, really. There's nothing going on this page. There's a fair amount of dialogue. They're not saying anything. There's a little bit of verbal sparring. Even then, it's light verbal sparring, where you get one or two word balloons per panel. Give us a little bit of lore or motivation or something mixed in with the verbal sparring. But yeah, no, they're not really going to do that. So, Christine, is that her name? Oh man, how many pages back do I have to go to find out a name? It's Christina. Oh fuck, I was close. Keeps watching because, I don't know, some kind of, she didn't have a reason for checking out this building in the first place, right? So she can keep watching even though she doesn't have a reason to do that either. And there's a full-on fucking demon and vampire who are stealing, library books or something. And while she's hiding, watching these guys do their library thievery, somebody sneaks up behind her, grabs her by the shoulder. So this is going to be Black Mass. Again, this all looks pretty good. He's picking decent angles for everything. Nothing feels awkward. And he's keeping it fresh enough with the angle. It's not feeling as though, we're staying on one plane for too long. Well, it gets a little bit boring here, but, it's not too bad, really. All right, so yeah, here's our big splash of Black Mass, just saying you should not be here. We're at, I don't even know what page this is. I'm going to guess page 10 or something. Not a fucking thing has happened yet in this comic. We're pretty much just getting a whole lot of, hey, check out how cool these characters look. Which, I suppose that's fine. I don't think it's the best way to go for your first issue. Definitely not vertical double page splash on a shot that's not particularly cool. You need more story than that. This is the thing that the Image guys, awesome guys, Maxim, whatever fucking guys, never really grasped, was that it's all well and good to have your big eye candy splash pages, double splashes, all that kind of stuff. But if you don't have any story to back it up, man, does that comic get boring in a hurry. Unless it is the absolute best art available at the time. What really happens in Weapon X? Not a whole lot, to be honest. But it sure as shit looks awesome while it's not happening. All right, so from there, we're going to cut to the Mediterranean off the coast of Greece. And we're going to cruise ship. And there's a whole bunch of ladies in bikinis. And sometimes not in bikinis. Again, this is some very barely covered up TNA. Pretty good amount of depth in this panel, though. The perspective isn't 100% there. I can't imagine too many guys criticized him on that, though. Just a hunch. And, the big shot of Black Mass here, this is pretty great. I made fun of it for it being just a page of nothing happening, but it's a good page of nothing happening, at least. I like the shadowing he's getting on the doublet here, I suppose, right? Little vest thing. And, okay, so back on the cruise, some dude's lounging around in a sun chair. He's big muckety-muck guy, and he gets a cell phone call. That's how important he is. He has an actual cell phone. Or should I say cordless phone, I suppose. And, okay, so asked if there's been any progress. We don't know what the answer is, but it was good, apparently, whatever the answer was. And he says he wants Swan to handle this personally. And then we're moving on again. Again, everything looks pretty solid. That's a tough angle. to actually make it look right. And yeah, he pulled it off without it really having any kind of awkwardness to it. So hats off to him for that. Okay, from there to Southern California, some chick's naked. And a bird has to fly in and peep on her a little bit. Are you going to blame the bird? Just looking for whichever excuse we can find to draw us some half-naked or almost naked chicks. Bird woke her up with his peeping. And she, I guess she's okay with it. She kind of stares him down, and he stares her down back, and she stares him down back. And the narration here advises us soon. So I assume soon is when we're going to get a story. I'm saying this as a mid-40s dude who's seen enough TNA and comics that this isn't particularly impressive. Again, when you're 16, you're probably like, hey, I'm okay with there being not a whole lot of story in this. Not anymore. These days, a kid wants to look at porn. All he does is goes online, which is messed up. You know where we had to go to find porn when we were kids? That's right, the woods. Why was there porn in the woods? Nobody knew. I don't think anybody wanted to know. But that was always where it was. It wasn't there every time. It was a stars aligning kind of thing. You had to kick the right rocks on the way. And once a year, you'd stumble upon a loose leaf page with some boobs on it. As it was meant to be. Yeah. Anyway, that's probably more than enough of that. Let's get back to this girl's ass, I guess. Oh, look at the colorist putting in work. He's putting in tan lines. That's a guy who likes his job a little bit too much. You know what I actually just noticed was just how much drawing is going on in this hair. A guy who hasn't quite figured out a method for drawing hair when he draws way too many strands. Anyway, back to Unidelphia State University, where Christina is still just kind of, in a particular position. I guess I probably shouldn't have had the porn talk before this page. When all of a sudden she gets to one of her migraines and goes, hey, I don't know how I know this, but something bad is about to go down. So that's how precognition works in this. And Black Mask goes, get behind me, as he gets, magic ninja stars thrown at him. Okay, sure, why not? And we're going to get another Coven who has come to stop the thievery a la Biblioteca. So this is some kind of rival faction. This is Pentagram and Gollum. So Pentagram's the one throwing the magic ninja stars. So we've got two big guys here, but apparently what's going to happen is Black Mass is going to sick Scratch on Gollum. Looks like he shoots fire at him, thinks he's dead for a second, but then Gollum yells, toys! That's what he says. And then smashes onto the ground and knocks Scratch off his feet, which sets off the alarm here by the looks of it. All fine looking stuff. We're getting to the point where it's more computer color than drawing. That would happen from time to time. Okay, so Scratch is going to keep wailing away at Gollum. Phantom is going to start hacking at Pentacle. And in the meantime, Black Mass is going to go and pick up whatever they've been trying to steal. Again, you'd think the big guy would go after the big guy. That's kind of standard, right? But apparently Black Mass is the leader. I don't know how often you see the strong guy be the leader in a particular group. But that's the dynamic they've figured out. And so just when he's about to go pick up the thing, he's going to get knocked over by, I think this is a big, magic or psionic fist. This seems to be the leader of the other Coven. This is Grimoire. So everybody's got their witchy or satanic type names. So once Black Mass is off his feet, Grimoire kind of magics the whatever item they were looking for over to him. And it looks like they're probably going to teleport out of there. Yeah, that's okay. That's fine, I guess. All right, so once the other Coven has disappeared, Black Mass turns to Christina and says, you have a gift. Because you told me that bad shit was going to happen when I was looming over you. So he's decided that because of her gift, she's been marked. And this other Coven, yeah, sure, I'll just pronounce it properly from now on, is going to be hunting for her for the rest of her life. So they're just going to teleport her back to their headquarters with them. She doesn't really get much of a say in it. And she mentions how the guy with the beard seemed to know him, and that's when he gets all pensive and goes, yes, he does. He is my brother. Which I guess makes you think of the Cain and Abel shit that was at the beginning of this thing. Man, it's always a choice to do a gigantic head as a splash page, I think he pulls it off okay. He manages to keep it mostly in proportion. Toughest thing is just kind of figuring out how to render that sort of thing. Because there's only so many lines you can throw on a face before it really starts feeling pointless. So he doesn't do a half-bad job at it. There's some weird structures going on in here, but, I don't mind that too much. All right, so then, okay, the Coven is going to start teleporting away, because even though he said he was going to teleport her with them, then they decide not to do that. And he entreats her to join the Coven in the future. And just as they're disappearing, with the alarms going off, all sorts of smoke in the room, that's when campus security busts in. And she's just kind of left to explain herself, I suppose. And that's going to be the end of the first issue. I don't know, I guess there was a little bit that got set up there. We got this first theft out of the way, and we got like a nominal introduction to some characters. But with like very little narration, very little like backstory for anybody, everybody's very mysterious. Like Ian Churchill left plenty of room for all sorts of dialogue, all sorts of narrative boxes, and Jeff Loeb just kind of said, no, that's okay, you got this, bro. And then we're going to get a little bit of a sketchbook here. So this is the first drawings of the Coven, done in 1988, so 10 years, well, almost 10 years previous. So it would have been like 16, 17 or something, which seems about right. Yeah, I mean, that's a 17-year-old's drawing of a superhero team, a particularly witchy superhero team. Although, again, in 1988, it's interesting that he was coming up with this stuff at that time. Yeah, I guess they're not really as gothed up back here as they would have been back then. Although Phantom here looks pretty close. All right, then we get our sketches of our characters here. These are fun. The descriptions are, again, pretty bad. They seem to be taken pretty much whole cloth from back when he was sketching them when he was 17. No real descriptions of the characters, just more, like a description of what they look like and a description of their powers, generally speaking. Okay, so yeah, and we met all of these, at least. This is Spellcaster. That was the naked chick in the room with the owl. Oh, we got Kaboom by Jeff Matsuda. Look at Jeff Matsuda drawing all sorts of anime-looking shit. He wasn't doing that just a couple years before this. Yeah, there's one of the covers for Coven number 2. And then we get a missive from Rob, as we would often do in a number 1. I guess particularly around when he's starting a new venture, which is what he's doing now with Awesome Comics. Rob tried to start up his new Maximum thing and run it concurrently with his Image titles. Image didn't like that and kicked him out, so now he's doing Awesome Entertainment. Again, theoretically. Pumping up the comic that you just theoretically read. And it's kind of typical Rob Liefeld stuff when he's excited, where he's all like just making spluttering sounds and explosion noises while he talks about how this is going to be the great new comic that's going to, put Awesome on the map. That's basically what the deal is. He thinks he's discovered the new Michael Turner or the new David Finch. He stumbled on something before Mark Silvestri or Jim Lee did for once. And it's not really the case. There's, I think, a total of 10 Coven books in existence over the course of several years. Oh, there's a fun bit in here where he talks about Cain and Abel, where he's like, here's Cain and Abel like I never imagined. So I assume by that, he means muscly. Because that's it. Everything else is just straight up Cain and Abel. And I mean, I'm pretty sure he knows that story. All right, so that's Coven number 1. That's barely a comic. I got no real problems with the art. The art is all fine. I don't think there's a bad page in there. But Jeff Loeb seems to have decided when he's writing for Rob or for one of his employees, he just doesn't need to put too much work in. These comics are all about just pinups, splashes, double splashes, etc. And Ian Churchill or Rob Liefeld tell him, roughly what they want the characters to say on this page. And then it feels like Jeff Loeb just writes down exactly what he was told and does it very minimally and just sends that off to the letterer. It would have been helpful to find out what these guys were stealing, what they were here for, or why they need it, or what the nature of the conflict is between the two Covens. We didn't get any of that. We didn't get really much of anything. We got, here's a bunch of superhero-looking guys. Oh, look, they're fighting. No twists, nobody even says anything clever over the course of this thing. And, again, Jeff Loeb is a writer. You'd think he'd at least be able to come up with some Scott Lobdell type, one-liner. But yeah, there's not a whole lot here. I imagine this is going to keep looking pretty good. I imagine we're going to keep finding excuses to show, barely clothed women. And I imagine that not very much of anything is going to get resolved at any point. Because again, Jeff Loeb seems to be letting the artist kind of run the ship on these things. And artists, when they're doing comics, they have no idea how to direct a story somewhere. For the most part, unless you get a guy who knows, he really knows how to draw and he really knows how to write. So like a John Byrne a Barry Windsor Smith, Bernie Wrightson, something like that. Like, you got to get somebody who really knows their shit. Otherwise, it's just going to keep being splashes of, okay, here's guys talking. Oh, shit, a fight happened, and then they ran away. And it'll just kind of meander around for 3 or 4 issues until eventually the artist decides that the story's done or they're bored with this. You know, it's not the biggest waste of money I've had on this channel, but, like, man, it feels like empty calories. Anyway, that is going to do it for this one. Thanks very much for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button. Helps with the algorithm stuff. If you want to see more, hit subscribe. And if you really want to help out, in the description, there's a link to my Patreon. And if you go subscribe there, that'll give you access to everything I do. So, whole bunch of comic book art, whole bunch of videos. Also in the description, there's going to be a link to the merch store if you want to go and pick up some Blood Force merch. And I know you do. We don't have a Blood Force vest yet, but maybe that's going to be updated at some point. You never know. You got to keep checking is the thing. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions. Commissions are open. So yeah, that's going to do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.